Hey, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the Convergence Healing Podcast. You guys are so great. I love being with you. I love getting to share content with you guys. It's part of my passion. What I love to do is it lights me up, and I hope it lights you up too. Today, our guest is Peter Alessandria. And before we jump in, sitting down to talk to Peter, I want to remind everybody that this episode is brought to you in conjunction with the Earth Walk. As part of their global wholeness clock, Earth Walk's mission is to create a global culture of peace, and we are tending to the moment of joy. To find out more about the Wholeness Clock and Earth Walk itself, its other shows, programs, events, and global connection, please visit their website at earthwalkunited.org/wholeness clock. Again, that's earthwalkunited.org/wholeness clock. So, as you can tell, I think there's a dog barking in the background in the neighborhood. Not sure if y'all heard that, but I am working from my home office, and this is another blessing that COVID has given to me. I tend to say that there is pain, and in pain there is healing. There is a call to our greatness. So the more we can actually embrace our pain, the more we actually learn and grow. Pain will either tear you down, or it will build you up, and you will become even greater and more amazing than you ever thought you could. So if anybody is listening who is in any kind of pain, whether it's physical, emotional, spiritual pain, one, I hope my podcasts are giving you inspiration, and I hope they are part of that call to assist you in your greatness. And two, I just want to say I love you guys, and I want to give you that encouragement. I know that who you are underneath whatever is happening in your life is that you, as a person, as a human being, as a soul, are whole, perfect, and complete. So thank you for tuning in. Let's welcome our guest, Peter Alessandria. Peter, tell us a little bit about your background and how you, one of the first things when I saw you today was that the picture that's behind you. I just loved that picture. I thought it was really beautiful, but it is part of where you have been. It's part of your story. So tell us that story, those moments of pain, those experiences that shifted you from one experience, from one career into another.
Yeah, thank you, Peter. Thanks for the invitation. Thanks for the opportunity to be here and share with your audience. My story is pretty simple. I grew up in the New York City area, and I went to college in upstate New York. I studied economics and business, and I decided to go to law school after college, and I went to school in Buffalo, New York, and I studied law, and I did a master's degree in business administration as well. And I decided to move to the West Coast because I wanted to become an entertainment attorney. And I literally bought a one-way plane ticket for Los Angeles right after graduation and moved my whole life to California. And the first thing I had to do was learn entertainment law, because in Buffalo, there was no entertainment law classes. And basically the way I did that was I befriended a bunch of entertainment attorneys and started reading their contracts. And I learned about the film business, the television business, and all that. Now, one of the perks of that career, of that industry, was eventually I got to go on the sets where they were actually making the film projects, where they were shooting the TV shows. And that was just so cool to me because I had never been exposed. You know, this was back in the early 90s, mid 90s. We didn't have there wasn't a lot of behind the scenes available like on YouTube, because YouTube wasn't around. So the first time I walked on a film set, it was like, wow, this is so cool with the lights and the cameras and everything that was going on. And I basically fell in love with the creative process. I worked as an entertainment attorney for almost 20 years, but I became kind of an amateur filmmaker. This was during the rise of the independent film community. Things like the Sundance Film Festival were becoming popular, Telluride Film Festival. And I started hanging around with these independent filmmakers, and I just fell in love with the process, the visual arts process, film, TV, that kind of thing.
So you went from a lawyer. Go ahead.
Sorry?
Go ahead.
Yeah, I was still a lawyer. I was still practicing law. That was my day job. And then I was spending my nights and weekends learning about camera angles and lenses and lighting and how to make film projects. I ended up writing, producing, and directing 6 short films. And then in 2002, I picked up a still camera for the first time, a digital still camera. And I fell in love with photography. And
so you learned by just doing.
I've never
You just
taken a
picked up stuff
class.
you learned by showing up, by doing it. As a lawyer, you learned contracts by digging into actual contracts. And as a filmmaker, you just started filming.
Exactly.
That's
Exactly.
awesome.
And I taught myself photography basically.
Right.
And
Those leaps, Peter, those leaps where you took these shifts. Can you, what was that moment? What was that like when you actually, I always am interested in that moment where people like do something and that becomes a whole new trajectory in their life. You showed up on a film set and that shifted your life. You picked up a camera and that shifted your life. Tell me about those moments. I'm always interested in how that happens.
the best way I could describe it is just passion.
Hmm.
It something ignited inside of me. The thing I was going to say was I've never taken a photography class. I've never taken an art class. I didn't even take an art appreciation class in college to kill some credits.
Oh,
I
wow.
was law, business, economics, totally down that path. And so when I first was and growing up in New York and all that, I mean, I was never exposed to any kind of artistic, creative endeavors at all. So, and for whatever reason, it wasn't right or wrong. It's just the way my life was going. But when I finally was exposed to that, it just became so exciting for me. And the thing with filmmaking was, it was like I could have an idea for something, and then 6 weeks later or 6 months later, whatever it was, I could see a finished product that was created basically from scratch.
Hmm.
When I did my film projects, I had to write the script, I had to cast the actors, I had to find the locations, I had to edit the films. I even did the music for them, even though I'm not a musician, I did it on the computer. And I just love that creative process.
It's
And then the thing
amazing.
with the still camera was, it was like, especially with digital photography, it was instant feedback. So I
Mhm.
could see, I began to experiment with light. What happens if I put the light over here or over here? What happens if I do a long exposure? And it was so interesting for me that I could create a reality based on what was going on in here and then express that in the world.
Mhm. You said something about passion and you just picked up that camera and it was a moment of passion, I guess. It excited you. Passion to me is sort of like a kissing cousin to joy. It's like a synonym to joy. And joy is one of the most important things to me as a therapist, because most of the time when I see my clients, and my habit in my life, I think it's a human experience, is to just get so focused on what the problem is that we have to fix this thing. And I find that there's moments where when I live in joy, the problem takes care of itself, right? And I see that even physically with my clients. I've done a lot of work with addiction, with anxiety issues, with clinical anxiety issues, with pain and cancer and stuff like that. And when I could get my clients to make that shift to find their passion or live their passion, or what I really like to think of as joy. Joy to me is a spark that lives in every single human being. It can get covered over with. And when you picked up that camera, that spark ignited, or maybe some of the poop that was on top of it got brushed off, right? So it was able to shine through or come out, right? Those moments are so interesting to me. And so when we align with those experiences, it's like life just starts to unfold. And you've had these series of unfoldment, because one of the things you talk about in the notes that I got for you about who you are and what you're speaking, your message, is there was something that came out of the global crisis as well. And that was your being the camera. That was your being the photographer. And you
Right.
wrote in here about how you are holding yourself back,
Yep.
right? Your abilities, you were doing well, you were, taking your shots, you were getting recognized for your work, but you were hitting a point where I guess you felt you only could go so far, or things weren't blossoming or taking off. Tell me a little bit about that. I'm real curious about that moment in time and what you did to shift that energy.
Well, it was a process for me. It wasn't one moment, it was a series of moments. And
Mhm.
it started in 2009 with the global financial crisis, actually the end of 2008. And I literally lost my law practice in a matter of months. I went from having a really nice practice, a nice life, to basically nothing in terms of income or business. And I tried for months to resurrect the law practice, to get things going again, but nothing came. And eventually I did come to a crossroads, and the crossroads was, what was I going to do with the rest of my life? Now, I had fallen, as I said, I had fallen in love with photography, but to that point, it was only a hobby. It was, or it might be, I could call it a mania or whatever. I mean, I was really into it, but I wasn't making any money and it wasn't a business. So I came to that point and I said, well, what would I like to do with the rest of my life? And I always came back to photography. So this is 2009. So eventually I made the decision that, I'm going to go for it. I'm not married. I don't have kids. Financially, I was in a pretty good space. And I thought, you know what, if I'm ever going to do this, now is the time. So I went for it. And I decided I was going to work as a photographer full time. At the same time, I decided to move back to the East Coast to be closer to my family. And I set up shop basically at the end of 2009. And Peter, for the next the next 2.5, almost 3 years, I was stuck. Mm. And at first I thought, well, it must be the economy, because the economy was still bad. And then I thought, well, no, it's not the economy. It must be all the competition from all the other photographers out there. I thought, no, that's not really it. And I thought, well, it must be because I don't have a formal education in art or photography. At one point, I was even convinced it was because I didn't have the latest and greatest camera equipment. But what I eventually realized was the problem was not out there, the problem was in here.
Yes.
And it turned out I had a very negative self-image when it came to being a creative person. I went to school for law and business, but I never studied art, I never studied photography. And I found that I had a profound fear of criticism, a fear of rejection, of just basically not being good enough. And that conspired to keep my life very small. Now, if you look, the subtitle of my book is Overcoming Our Self-Imposed Limits to Have the Life We Want. Mm. And what I found was it was me that was holding myself back. It was all these negative thoughts and beliefs that I had about myself.
Yeah.
And
go ahead.
That was the poo-poo that was keeping my creativity and everything else buried.
Right.
So I had to muster the courage to push through all of that. And this book is all about how I did that, how I reprogrammed all the negative thinking. And I went from somebody who never won an award for anything in my life to somebody who has won more than 70 awards for my photography. I went from somebody who never imagined it was possible to have my work published in a newspaper or magazine or online to somebody whose photos have been seen by millions of people around the world. And from somebody who never thought I could make money, selling my art, licensing my images, to somebody who sold prints to collectors as far away as Australia. So it's been a complete transformation.
Yeah, wow, congratulations. That is amazing. I think it's important to recognize each other and pat you on the back, because that just keeps us all going. And we need to do that more. And I can so relate to your story, because this actually behind me, some people always think it's like a green screen, but this is actually a painting. This is a painting that I did years ago. And I have a similar story where I had all kinds of judgment about, I wanted to be an artist. I wanted to be creative with a paint or a pencil or medium of that sort, right? Creativity is in so many forms, but the one I wanted to just try was painting. And I had heard so many negative voices in my life and been told so many times that you can't do it, it's not going to work, you're not very good at it, that type of thing. And I had this idea that if I can't draw, then I can't be an artist. And I was terrible at drawing. I could do architectural drawing. I excelled at architectural drawing. I was really good at holding a ruler and drawing a straight line. But when it came to actually life drawing or anything like that, I couldn't do it. And because of that, I judged myself as, well, I'm not really creative, or, oh, I could never be an artist. And I heard all those negative voices and I said, no, I don't want to be that way. I don't want to think that way. And so I actually just started to paint. I actually opened up a studio. I got an art studio, and I did a bunch of things at that time. I made a movie at that time that was premiered at the Sundance, during the Sundance Film Festival. I did that, and I started painting, and I did all kinds of stuff. And I actually was able to sell my work. People actually commissioned me to paint things, and they bought what I created. Now, it didn't have a passion for me. It was something was good at and it was fun, but I didn't pursue it anymore because it didn't really have that joy, that element of joy. I liked it. There was a few careers that I've had over time. I think I mentioned to you that I was a designer with the wholesale manufacturing world, right? And I would design showrooms around the world in 10,000, 20,000 square foot showrooms and build these spaces out, design and pick colors and patterns and do all this type of stuff. And I was really good at it, but it didn't light my spark. It didn't allow that joy. It was fun and it was enjoyable, but it didn't light me up. And so, yeah, and this was another thing. It was something I really thought was interesting and creative, and I broke those negative thought patterns that were in my head, saying, that chorus or the crazy roommate, as a friend says, that that says it'll never work. You can't do that, right? I challenged that voice, and this is the result of that, right?
Great.
I think those moments are so important. Those moments where what you just demonstrated, that you stopped, that you were doing something, but you were holding yourself back. There's a conversation that we have in our heads, right? And we have to start hearing it consciously because it's playing in the background. But we also have to challenge it, have a different conversation, right? What did you start saying to yourself that you were able to create that shift? Do you remember what that might have been, or how did
Oh
you?
yeah, I have it all written
It's
down.
all in that
Actually,
book. Great.
it's all in here.
So tell me a little
Basically,
bit more about that.
what I recognized was that the problem was not the situation. The problem was with how I saw myself in that situation.
Oh, yeah.
Many years ago, when I was a lawyer, I was having an argument with somebody. And in the middle of the conversation, she stopped, she put her hands on her hips and she said, "Who do you think you are?" Now, she meant it as an insult, but those words stopped me in my tracks. I thought, wow, what a great question. Who do I think I am?
Right.
I mean, I may have actually said that out loud because she suddenly had this very confused look on her face. I never saw her again, but that question has stuck with me. And what I realized was it was my idea about myself that was holding me back. The idea about myself that I wasn't good enough, the idea about myself that I didn't have what it took to be successful as a creative person, the idea that people were going to reject me, that people were going to criticize me, and I was not going to be able to handle the rejection or the criticism.
Right.
Because it's not the rejection or the criticism that's the problem, it's the fact that I can't handle it. Or basically what it really is I think maybe they're right about me being not good enough. So I had to begin to reprogram. And I started with affirmations. I started with a vision statement. I started with guided visualizations and meditations where I reprogrammed all that subconscious stuff. Because the other thing that I found for me is I was walking around with an idea about myself, but I wasn't really aware of it. I wasn't conscious of it.
Exactly.
And I've done a little bit of research, and it seems like we, especially as kids, when something painful happens, we dissociate from it. We repress it, and it becomes part of the subconscious program that's running our lives, and we're not even aware that that's what's running our lives. Just one day I wake up and I get fired from a job because I was afraid to do the work assignment because I was afraid I was going to make a mistake, and then it was going to be more proof that I was a bad person or not good enough or whatever.
Right.
So I had to begin to reprogram all of that.
And
it
I
was
think that's so true in health too, because
everything.
yeah, people tend to use what you're talking about only in the form of material things, right? Of particular achievements or skills or something like that. And I love to take what you're talking about and bring it into the form of health, because we're walking around with those similar voices that are chattering inside of our head about our chemical state of being, our wellness, our mental health, our spiritual health, our physical health. There's a belief system that we talk about, right? Oh, I can't do that. I'm too old, or my body has this, right? And as somebody who has been slammed into the back of a semi-truck and shattered bones and had to learn how to walk again and all that type of stuff, if I would have followed the belief systems that I was told, the predictions that I was given by doctors, by friends or family members, I wouldn't be here today. I really, truly believe that. I would be probably in a wheelchair or not even alive. And my body had a whole belief system around my health, around my physical wellness and abilities. And I had to catch it. And I did stuff like what you're talking about, challenging those voices, right? Affirming a new experience, even when that experience felt, quote unquote, impossible, right? And I started to do things, and I was able to heal things that the doctors told me I could never heal. I was able to walk, I was able to do all kinds of stuff, right? I changed my story that was being written for me by by advocates for, and it's, and although they're advocates and it's a good thing, but they're advocating for my pain. And I had to stop that. I had to stop identifying as handicapped, and I had to start identifying as well and whole. And so
That's changing who you think you are. I mean, it
absolutely.
all comes down, for me, it all comes down to the fact that it's whoever we think we are is exactly who we're going to end up being in life.
Yeah,
And it's impossible to act in a way that's inconsistent with our predominant thoughts and beliefs about ourselves.
absolutely. What do
So,
you say to people? Go ahead.
well, I was going to say in chapter 3 of my book, I talk about true power.
Mm,
And I define true power as the ability to consciously choose and or change our thoughts, feelings, words, and actions. And it's by
mm.
consciously and deliberately thinking thoughts, and my understanding, the way it works, and at least the way it seems to work for me, is my thoughts lead to my feelings lead to my words and actions, and my words and actions lead to the outcomes that I experience in my life.
Oh my God.
So
Okay. Okay. I'm stopping you for a moment because what you just said is so exciting to me, because I actually have a template. I literally have a template that I work with my clients with. And it's kind of like what you just wrote out there. It's like a mathematical equation that my thoughts plus my feelings plus my actions, physical things, plus my behaviors, which I can constitute as habits, equal the results of the life I'm living. Literally. So if I want to create a particular result, then I need to have thoughts, feelings, actions, behavior that align with that result. And if there's
exactly.
anything that's out of alignment with that, I need to bring awareness to it, because most of the time I'm not even aware that it's out of alignment. And I need to shift that. You're the first person I ever spoke to that actually has like sort of given that same equation. That's so exciting to me, Peter.
Well, it was just looking back on my life and looking, at the outcomes that I experienced. Now, there's another part to the equation. So
Right?
before we can get to true power, in chapter 2 of my book is called Taking Responsibility.
Mm.
And what I learned for me is that if I'm not willing to take responsibility for my thoughts, feelings, words, and actions, then I don't have the power to change those things.
Yep.
So if I'm blaming my mother because my life isn't working, then guess what? I don't have the power to change my life because I'm giving that power away to someone or something else.
Wow, Peter,
So
I wrote a whole book on this too. We are downloading from the same source.
there you
We are
go.
absolutely downloading from the same source. I call that
That's
stepping
right.
out of the fog and taking radical responsibility.
There you can see it, chapter 2.
There you go, right on.
Taking responsibility. So because when I don't take responsibility, I'm giving my power away.
Yeah.
And as long as I give my power away, I can't change my life. But here's the thing, I had to redefine responsibility because most of us equate responsibility with blame. We equate responsibility with liability or with guilt. So I found that for me, I never wanted to admit when I did something wrong or made a mistake, because in my mind, that was just more proof that I was a bad person. That was just more proof that I was unworthy or not good enough. So I had to change that. So I tell people right off the bat, responsibility is not the same as blame. It's not the same as liability. It's not the same as guilt. I
Yes.
suggest the 3 A's: awareness, accountability, and action. All
Mm-hmm.
right. Awareness is what we've been talking about. Being aware in the moment. What am I thinking? What am I feeling? What am I saying? What am I doing? And what effect is that having on me or other people? Number 2, accountability. I become willing to be accountable when the effects of my thoughts, feelings, words, and actions are negative, either on myself or another person. And then step 3 is action. Get into action. Make things right when I've done something wrong.
Mm-hmm.
That formula has completely changed my life. The other part that's completely changed my life is just being nicer to myself.
Mm.
The whole last chapter of my book is forgiveness. It's almost 20% of the book is about forgiveness. And it was the most important thing for me is to learn how to forgive myself and then to forgive other people.
Mm.
And that's a whole, that's an ongoing, I'm a work in progress on all of this, Peter, by the way. I don't have any of this handled. But as I was writing this book, it all came out.
Yeah. Yeah. I have a practice, a daily practice of forgiveness. And it needs to be daily because I develop resentments or frustrations or any of that kind of stuff. And I've understood forgiveness. It's something I work on with my clients regularly. I understand forgiveness as giving myself freedom. So there's an old saying that I don't think has ever been properly attributed to anybody because it is so old, that not forgiving someone is like drinking poison intended for someone else, right? Because we poison our minds, we poison our thoughts, we go below the line in that victim thinking and blame and all that type of stuff. And forgiveness gives us that fear. And for some reason, people have this idea that forgiveness means that whatever was done, whatever trauma or abuse or whatever they may have experienced, if you forgive, it means it's okay that that was done to you. And that's not the case at all. Forgiveness is personal freedom. It's no longer being engaged in that poisonous thought, that below the line victim behavior of blame or shame or whatever it is.
And what I say for me is I have to change how I see myself in order to truly forgive.
Yes.
I have to move from being a victim to taking responsibility for my life. Now, as I say in my book, number one, we have to, this is what I heard you saying, forgiveness is not something we do for the other person. It's something we do for ourselves.
Amen.
To free ourselves from that resentment, which is, I have the quote, I have to show you this. Holding on to resentment is like drinking poison and expecting the other person to die.
Yeah, there you go.
I never can read it, but it's in there.
That's awesome.
And
Peter,
so
you're like my spiritual twin.
I guess so. We have the same name. You know, and what I say is I walk people through the process. Now, we're not letting somebody else off the hook. We're not condoning somebody else's bad behavior. We're not saying we have to become a doormat for somebody's inappropriate or unloving actions.
Absolutely not.
But what we do is take our power back. And I can hold somebody accountable without being a victim. I can protect myself. I can take care of myself without being angry, without being resentful. A big part of this chapter in my book is on boundaries. And I say that for me, the primary way we take care of ourselves in our relationships is by having healthy boundaries. But most of us don't know what boundaries are or how to use them.
Not at
So I have a
all.
whole process in here. And I talk about an ex-legal client of mine that really taught me how to have healthy boundaries. The most important thing that I learned is that my boundaries are for me. They're not for other people. See, I was setting boundaries, and then when other people were crossing those boundaries, I would be all angry, and I would be like, you know, I would use that as a reason to be resentful. And then I realized, wow, I'm actually just trying to control them, but now I'm using a fancy word like boundaries, so I think it's okay. My boundaries are for me, they're not for other people.
Exactly. Exactly. Thank you. You know, control is such an interesting thing. And it's in one of my books one of my next books, I have a whole chapter about control and about how control is an absolute waste of time. And if you know, all the clients that have come to me, every single one of the thousands of clients that have come to me, if control worked, they wouldn't be with me. Right? Control is such a waste of time. And I really think we need to create a new jargon around it. Even in the therapeutic industry, we have to stop talking about personal control or stuff like that, because control is always a tight experience. It is always a gripping, a holding on to, a clamping down. It is a tight experience. So I actually have been trying to substitute in my vocabulary the word governance, right? I can't control my own thoughts. I really can't. If somebody tells me to think about pink elephants, I'm going to be thinking about pink elephants. Whether I want to or not, I'm thinking about pink elephants. I can't control my breath. I can't control, you know, my thoughts. I can't control my heart, but I can govern. I can regulate or govern my breath. I can govern my thoughts. I could say, oh, there's that thought. I want to think a different thought. If I keep telling myself not to think that thought or not to have that behavior, or not to do that thing, then all I'm doing is jumping into the energy of that experience.
Right.
And I'm
Well,
resisting
that's
it,
why
but I'm in it. Go ahead.
that's why I talk about it as power, as true power.
Yeah.
Most of my life, I thought power was getting other people to do what I wanted them to do. But now I see true power as having power over myself. And
Yes.
again, the way I define it is the ability to consciously choose and or change our thoughts, feelings, words, and actions. So what you just said is perfect. I'm aware of a thought that's not serving me. I have the ability to change that. I
Yeah.
have the ability to choose a new thought, but I
Yep.
have to be conscious. I have to be aware. I have to be present in the motion, in the moment.
Yep.
Now, the other
And the
thing I would
same for our
say is,
feelings. The same for our
yeah,
feelings,
exactly,
because if
exactly.
we, a lot of people are just doing these positive affirmations and chanting and all that type of stuff, which is wonderful. But if the feeling is it's never going to work, like an Eeyore running around inside you, right? Or that
Right.
feeling is a pit or in your stomach or a knife in your back. It doesn't matter how positive your affirmations are. You know, in my background is I have a master's degree in science and religion. It's called consciousness studies, where we studied everything from string theory and quantum theory all the way down to like the Bhagavad Gita's and you know, Hinduism, Zoroastrianism, stuff like that. And
Cool.
I love it. But my big takeaway from that entire course of work is really that our thoughts and our feelings create the world we live in. They create
Absolutely.
the reality that we
Right.
are experiencing. And if
Right.
our thoughts are, you know, about goodness and health and wellness, but our feelings are in that pit, we're going to create a very dysfunctional world. And if our thoughts are I'm unworthy and our feeling is I'm empty or nobody loves me or a lack of love, then you're creating that quantum collapse that is putting that reality right in front of you.
Right.
And so, you know I have this equation like you do of thoughts, feelings, actions, behavior, right, equal results. But if you are just to simplify it even more, if you can have a thought and a feeling that's in alignment with that thought, the thought that I am worthy, right? I am, like you did with your photography. I like to say, a well
Good enough.
respected and well paid photographer, right? I have that thought about who I am, my abilities, and my skill. And I have that feeling of excitement or fluttering in my belly or whatever it is, right? That feeling of warmth in my heart. Those two things come together, create that quantum collapse of this moment in our holographic universe, this moment in time.
We literally attract things that are in alignment with that. We
Absolutely.
attract things and experiences that are consistent with that vibration.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, the big thing for me, Peter, I have to say the biggest thing for me has been self-love, to learn how to love myself. The reason I've gone from having never won an award for anything in my life and being terrified of putting my work out there where I could be seen, to actually embracing all of that and having a bigger life. I mean, the title of the book is Be Bigger Than You Think You Are. It was my thoughts and beliefs about myself that were holding me back.
Yeah.
And the biggest change has been going from being my own worst enemy to my own best friend.
Your
But
cheerleader. Yeah.
that's a choice. That's a decision that I had to make. And I had to fall in love with myself.
Yep.
And I had to learn what it means to love. See, for me, love is not a feeling. Love is a decision. It's a choice.
Mm-hmm.
And it's something that I have to make every day, especially when it comes to myself. So when the inclination comes up to beat myself up because I didn't do something right, I have to stop and say, I have a choice here. I have a decision to make right now. I can go down the old path because I know how that goes, or I can make the new choice. And that is to love myself. I define unconditional love as being willing to love myself when I least like who I'm being. And that's my measure of success, by the way. How much I can love myself when I least like who I'm being.
So, you know, Peter, I have this group on Facebook that's called Cultivating Joy, Convergence Healing. I would love to invite you to do some contributions to that group. That quote right there, if you can make a note of that, I would love for you to create some memes or to give me some quotes and I can create some memes. And yeah, we'll promote your book, of course, but it would be wonderful if we could get maybe a few little memes and then a little paragraph describing or how to implement that, right? How to move into that experience of joy. And if anybody is wanting to join us on that group, all you have to do is go to Facebook and type in Cultivating Joy, Convergence Healing. We're right there for you. And I'd love for you guys to join the group. And in a moment, we're going to wrap up. I'm taking a little tea break. So this is my Get Well, Be Well tea. If you guys are interested, healing teas, you can go to convergencehealingteas.com. Delicious. This is, it's one of my favorites. I like to drink it cold, room temp, whatever.
Peter,
It's such a beautiful color.
can I mention the workshop that I do? I do a free online workshop every Wednesday night.
Please.
This is for anybody who's interested. We do an online Zoom workshop every Wednesday night from 8 p.m. to 9:30 p.m. All are welcome. You don't have to have the book. You don't have to have read the book. And you can register on my website, which is bebiggertoday.com/classes and events. As I said, all are welcome. We're just starting on chapter 5 right now, which is entitled Decision Making and the Desire to Feel Better.
Well, Peter, I love that. And I'm sure there's other ways that people can reach out to you. Give us your hashtags or your at Twitter or whatever it is. Tell us more.
The best way to reach me is through my website, which is bebiggertoday.com. It's all one word. I'm also on Facebook under my name, Peter Alessandria, and Peter Alessandria Photography. My website for my photography, if you're interested in seeing more photos like this, is peteralessandriaphotography.com. That's all one word. I am on Instagram at Peter Alessandria. Don't really use Twitter much. And then on YouTube, I have 2 YouTube channels. Be Bigger Today is the YouTube channel for my book, Be Bigger Than You Think You Are. And then Peter Alessandria Photography is my photography YouTube channel.
Well, Peter, thank you so much. I love that you're out there and you have so many sites and ways that people can actually connect with you. Thank you. And as we close, I want to remind everybody that today's program is brought to you in partnership by Earthwalk's Global Wholeness Clock. And its daily moments offer a variety of opportunities such as global community access to live interviews, health and wellness classes, meditations, live music and art, conscious connection, and relationship building. Their online wholeness center offers daily programs at the designated times of the wholeness clock. And to find out more, go to earthwalkunited.org/wholeness clock. Peter, thank you so much for being our guest. I really appreciate your time and your energy and sharing your message. And I love that we're so aligned. I think we have something that we're going to build on. So for all those out there listening, thank you so much for tuning in. You can find us on YouTube. You can find us on Facebook. You can find us on Twitter. You can find us on Instagram. I would love for you all to connect with us. If anybody is out there who is needing a moment of joy or is needing to shift out of that garbage into their gold, take a moment, go and connect with Peter and his work, connect with my work and all the other things, join our communities. We're there for you, because underneath all the stuff that you may be experiencing, whether it's addiction or trauma or abandonment or pain or a tumor or anxiety, whatever it is, I know that the truth of you is that you are absolutely, without a doubt, whole, perfect, and complete. And so let that joy, let that wholeness, let that perfection of who you are shine through. It's there. It may be covered up, but it's there. And with that, we're going to sign out. Thank you, everybody. Have a beautiful day. Make it a great day. And namaste.
Thank you, Peter. Thank you so much.
Awesome. Bye-bye.